Hello, my name's Rob and welcome to SwiftSlots. Now it's true guys, my knob has indeed shrunk. The knob on my controller. Now I've been looking at this controller for a few days now, having owned it for about a week or so, and there's something still not quite right about it. If you remember in the last video I shrank the top plate because I hold my controller like this, and that top plate being shrunk made it much more comfortable. But I've been holding it and ready for race day. And I've been thinking about it. I think, what else is niggling me about this? And I realised that these knobs here are a little bit too tall. Now, if you can see from that, this knob here is 5mm lower because I've already popped it on the lathe and I've adjusted it to see how I feel about the process. And it works. You can comfortably get 5mm of lower height without actually compromising the grub screw in the back of the control knob. So I thought I'd just make this quick little video just to show you what I've done. Now I know a lot of you won't have a lathe, but some of you might know somebody who's got a lathe, so this might be some food for thought later on down the line if you end up getting one of these controllers and you want to lower those control knobs down a little bit more so they don't get in your way of your hand, because as you can see there, that rear one is not actually touching my hand at all, but the front one is. So I think this little job will help me and it might help you as well. Also, I've added a little bit of an extra down here and I'll show you that. So let's get on my bench and I'll show you how I reduce the height of that knob. We'll do it to the other three and then we can see how it feels in my hand. Okay, so let's start with the really easy and somewhat boring modification that I've done since the last video, and that is just to put this piece of tube over this M3 screw, because that M3 screw sticking out of this controller does look a little bit cheap and janky. It really isn't a particularly great look. It's a perfectly reasonable solution to an adjustable trigger stop, but it doesn't look particularly great. So all I did was took some of this model RC car heavy duty battery wire, it's 10 gauge, and I've just taken a little bit of the sleeving off the end of it, and then with a little bit of thinners wiped off that print, and that just left me with a little tiny black tube. And I just offered the tube up to the distance and then trimmed it back until it fitted, or the length fitted, and then just stretched it over the M3 screw. And now you've got what resembles kind of a little black post, and it looks a lot more solid. It looks a lot nicer visually, so it doesn't make any difference, but it's just a nicer looking solution to just a screw sticking out the handle. So that's that. So let's move on to these knobs now. As you can see, this one here is about 4.5 to 5mm lower, and as I showed you in the introduction, hang on, which this way there. So now I can hold this now, you see, and my thumb doesn't actually touch it, and you can see the front one is still touching by a little bit, so there's a chance that I could move it with my finger while I'm racing potentially. But if I was to lose about 5mm off that, I would actually clear that front one as well, or at least get really close to clearing it. So I've taken this one off and I've had a little bit of a play, as you can see, and I have successfully managed to lower it down, and I haven't actually changed anything about the actual fitting of it, i.e. the thread is still where it is and it's still got thread in the bottom there, and all I've done is just literally taken away the most amount of material that I could possibly take away, and that has lowered it down by 5mm. And the only other thing that I've actually had to do, there's a little bit of a flat on this potentiometer here, and I've just lowered the flat down to within a couple of mil or half a millimeter or so of the actual plastic screw, or the top of the metal pot. And then this is an 11mm socket, by the way, so you can just nip that back. If I spin that nut off as well, you'll see what else I've done on here, and hopefully this will show actually, but I've just nipped the corners of those points of the thread, just nip those off, only fractionally, just taking them back, because some of the skirtings on some of these knobs there, they just slightly catch in that nut as they're turning. So just by taking off the corners of the nut, that just helps to seat the knob down, and you get a little bit more, little bit closer to the control body at the top here, and it doesn't actually seem to bind up with the nut. So the sizes that I've decided on is about 160 thou off the bottom of the skirt of the knob itself, and then once you've achieved that, you could take out from the original base of the internal part of the screw about 120 thou. So we take 160 thou off this surface to bring it closer to that thread, and then the inside surface there we can take about 120 thou off. Now I have only done this one, and I do want to double check those sizes, so I won't publish or won't give you those sizes on a written down piece of paper just yet. So we'll go onto the lathe now and we'll do this one, and then I'll actually write it down for you, and just to double check on those exact sizes that I decided to take it down to. So a lot of you guys have actually asked if I could do more lathe content. Now that's a lot of work to take out all the lathe parts out of my videos. So what I'll do on this particular video, rather than doing the lathe work at full speed or double speed like I usually do, I'll just run it at 1:1, so you can actually see the work being done in real time. It'll only take a couple of minutes. And that might be interesting for some of you lathe fans out there. Right, so also one other thing that I've done is I've taken this large drill here. I don't know what size it is. It's about 12 mil, and I've wrapped a piece of brass around it, and obviously it is sprung back out after you've done that. But what that means now is I can slide this piece of brass over that knob like that. It's a really nice fit, and that means now I can clamp that in the lathe really securely without A, denting the finish, or B, marking the finish, or in taking off the anodizing. So I can now pop that, and that gap there sits between 2 of the 3 jaws. It holds the jaws like that, like my fingers, so that gap there is completely exposed, and with the gap in it, it is able to close it up. So that's what you'll need to make something like this if you want to do this sort of conversion yourself at some point. And this is just 1.5 or 1 mil brass just wrapped around, and that holds nice and tight like that, and there you are. Right, so let's get to the lathe and let's turn this knob down, and I'll give you the actual sizes officially. Okay, so the measurements that I've just given you, you can pretty much ignore totally, because during this particular process I machined off all my reference points. So I'm doing this on the fly now. So what I'm doing is I'm bringing the cutter up to the face of the work and zeroing my slide so that I've got a good 0 reference to start the process. And what you'll find is I'm actually going to do the cuts using the back of the tool, and there's a slight taper to this tool. So as I move the tool from left to right, I'm actually taking off material using the taper of the actual cutter rather than just plunging in. And I've discovered that that will give you a really clean cut on the face of the knurling, because we do want a clean cut, and it saves me having to do any other work afterwards to sort of make it smooth, because the cut itself is actually making it smooth anyway. So here we go. We're just about now to remove all of my references that gave me the original measurements as I take this cross cut and actually surface up the bottom of the knurled nut there. And that's basically removing all of my old reference points. So then I have to sort of go in and make it up by hand. So there we are. So that's now gone. So that was my reference point that I've now completely lost. So now I'm having to go into the job and actually recreate the internal rebate and actually just do it on the fly. The trouble is with aluminium is it's quite sticky material, and some aluminiums are stickier than others, and this has got a little bit of stick to it. So the cutter will actually start getting a little bit bound up with aluminium on the tip, and then I have to go in and clean it all out occasionally to try and keep a really clean cut. So here we are. That's not what you're supposed to do really. I decide to use the screwdriver. It's a safer option. Then I actually decide to turn the lathe off and use a cutter, as you should do. So don't do what I do. Turn the lathe off first. It's always the best option. So here we go in again. We're going to go in for another cut, and we just keep on going in and out until we get what we think we should be looking for. And occasionally, here we are, you'll see me popping in there with my eyepiece. So that's a 20 times loop, and that gets me right in, and I can see exactly what I'm supposed to be cutting, and it makes a very accurate job. A lot of model making really is just down to being able to see what you're actually doing, and I find that great magnification really helps that, and it makes some of these more difficult jobs a lot easier. So here we are, we're just pretty much at the end of it now, and I'm just checking on the wall thickness, cleaning the cutter again, and just coming in for that last pass just to set the depth right now, and just make sure that all my passes are nice and clean and the wall is nice and clean. Here we go. I'm just going in now just to clean up that wall and make it nice and thin, because like I say, I lost all my references at the beginning of this job by machining off the original wall completely. So I've got to sort of reinstate that and then just work it out and see how I go from there and see if it looks right. And I'm pretty happy with that. So I think we'll call that job done and we can take it out the lathe. Okay, so there you saw me reducing this knob down in size, and the overall height is now 590 thou from top to bottom, and the recess is 95 thousandths of an inch internally just there, and that gets a really nice fit on the knob and over the nut as well. So now I obviously have two of them. So the other thing that you need to do when you're doing this conversion, if you're mad enough to do it, is to reduce this shoulder a little bit further. So you've got a distance there of about 3 millimeters, and you need to come down to about a millimeter above this metal part of the potentiometer. So the way that I do it is I just take my Dremel and I very carefully take away most of that angle, and then I just come in with my scalpel and just trim up the very last bit at the very end with a sharp scalpel. So we just do that now, and then we can fit these two knobs on. And one last job that I forgot to do, which I need to do, is just to remove the tips of these nuts. So let's just do that now. Should just be able to put it back on the potentiometer, give it a nip up, make sure the other one was tight as well, and then put the knob on and do it up on the grub screw, and there we are. Absolutely great. So let's do the other two and then we can finish this job. There you are, that's the job all finished and the knobs lowered down by about 5 mil. And you can see it looks just the same as standard, but a little bit lower. And now, when I actually hold the controller, you can see that I don't actually have to touch those knobs at all when I'm holding the controller. And it's much more comfortable. Those knobs are not likely to get moved by my fingers. I don't even have to touch them if I don't want to. And they still move all nice and smoothly. They all end up in exactly the correct position like they're supposed to when they're all back at rest, just like that. And there we are. So that is the job done. I think we're pretty much done with this controller now. I think I can now take it to the track and I can use it and get on with learning how to use it and try and get the best out of it. So there you are. After that small amount of basic lathe turning, I'll now no longer be able to feel my knob whilst I'm racing. So I hope you've enjoyed this content, and if you have, maybe you'll subscribe, and if you could hit the little bell button, that would be awesome. So until the next time, thank you very much.